Hey, everybody, and welcome once again to the Fart Fetish Podcast. It's that podcast where we seek to find the answers to the what, where, how, and sometimes why of fart fetish, and try to help give a nuanced picture of the people that have fetishes. I'm your host, as always, Raj. Watch for new episodes every first Friday of the month on fartfetishpodcast.com, or check them out on most major podcast platforms. And if you're into erotic fart content, well, you can support the show by checking out the ad-supported erotic fart content on thefartcloset.com. And now I'd like to welcome back Master Jayden to the podcast. Jayden is a twice-returning guest and has shared about his experiences as a content creator as well as a fetishist in this space. In this episode, Jayden talks about communication struggles in kink and queer spaces, and how trauma, shame, and fantasy can intersect in ways that shape desire. He also reflects on social conservatism, mental health, and the importance of reclaiming identity through fetish. And he drops an announcement about a new podcast he's launching focused on male sexuality and the fetish. As always with Jayden, it's a stimulating and deep conversation, so let's get right into the Fart Fetish Podcast. Jayden, welcome back to the podcast. How have you been since we last spoke?
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm so pleased to be back. It's always a great time talking with you and listening to your show. I've been great. Just I took a little hiatus from content during the recording of this video. I'm getting back into that and venturing into other things within the fetish that we'll talk about. But I've been very well. Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear. That's great to hear, and I'm glad to have you back. Is there anything you mentioned taking a break from content, but is there anything new or interesting that you explored in the content space before this hiatus?
Before this hiatus, not really. I just kind of kept in with my, same old, making videos. Which now that I have a new place and I have more time, I'm gonna start making videos again, and they're gonna be a lot more um, they're gonna have better production. And I'm also starting a podcast too, which we'll get into later as well.
Awesome.
Um, yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be. I'm excited to what's gonna come.
That's great. That sounds awesome. I look forward to hearing about and talking with you about that. So, you actually reached out to discuss some topics. The first one I have is talking about how to express sexual desires and needs, not only in a relationship but also in a partnership. Can you talk more about first what that means and more about that in general?
Okay, yeah. So when we're talking about expressing yourself sexually and intimately, the first thing you really have to like combat yourself with is just like, you know, setting the accepting yourself aside. Really, what do you want to your core and being okay with that? Um, and also being okay with expressing that. Now partnerships and relationships, um, you know, relationships in general are always a gray area from when I come to realize it's not such a black and white thing. But when it comes to partnerships, I just like to put that in a category of like a non-romantic partnership between two people. So basically a friends with benefits type of thing. Um, and I wanted to bring this up because I'm noticing a trend within not just our community, but also just I think in kink in general. There's a huge absence of good communication, but also what we want. And it's not only because people don't know how to communicate what they want with some of these kinks, because there's not really good places to look to do that or know how to do that. But also some people genuinely just, you know, they don't have certain cues. Like, you know what I mean? Like in the gay community, it's always like a thing. If you hook up with someone, do aftercare, talk about what's consensual, what are your boundaries, what do you not want to say. And I feel like when it comes to just kink alone, that area is weird because people are like, okay, this isn't sex, so why am I worried about like what's I need to be saying, what I need to be doing? Um, but just in like a partnership, like being okay with taking things slow, really communicating with what you want. Don't go into it expecting everything. You both people to be comfortable, um, and just like express yourself and make sure that everyone else in the party is very on page with what they are, with what you want. And if someone says no about something, or if they're not ready, to get involved with something, then that's okay as well. Because I know that's a big pushback as well. Like, oh, they owe me this or they owe me that. not necessarily just have fun. Um, but coming from a relationship standpoint, um, it's very much like the same thing, except when you're in a romantic relationship, from my personal experience, it feels a lot deeper and just a lot better. And sexual intimacy is very important, which is why I wanted to bring it up in the first place. I think people forget about how important sexual compatibility and intimacy is in relationships, and we're just taught from a young age that, like, oh, sex isn't that important. Sex is a dodgy thing that we shouldn't be talking about. Kink is this, we don't need to be talking about it either. Wait till you're married to have sex if that's, what your religious ideology calls for. And we just kind of, as a society, disregard how important sexual intimacy actually is to its core, and it's extremely important. You know what I mean? Like, and that's something you need to, like, be serious about if you're settling down with someone, just as much as if they share my values and stuff, you know what I mean? And we kind of are sort away from that.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, communication, I think, is an overarching problem in many respects, as you basically said. How do you do you have ideas about how to encourage people to have more of these conversations, and bring up these difficult matters? Because I mean, my first guess is people don't want to talk about it because it's a fear of failure or disappointment. What do you think?
Um, I think it's also that too, but, like, and again, circle back to, like, the weird pushback between sexuality and stuff like that. But yeah, mainly it's just like, when we're talking about how to be more sexually open with your partners and stuff like that, I think a lot of it has to, like, you have to get rid of the barrier of, like, this feels weird, it's not important. So once you get rid of that barrier, because, like I said, like, a lot of people, especially in, like, we live in a very, like, heteronormative world where things are very done, like, kinda one way, and we're exposed to that, and not that that's a bad thing, but just that we're very much only exposed to one type of way and how to do things, and when it comes to the bedroom and kink, that's also how it is as well. And even if you are in a heterosexual relationship, it's good to explore other avenues of that relationship as well. But when society isn't teaching that that's a good thing to practice, you are gonna internalize that as it's not a safe place to also put that in a relationship as well. So just being able to communicate, do what you want, and be able to like, have a clear understanding of what you want and understand what the other person wants, come to a clear boundary is that's really all it is. You know what I mean? That's really all it is. Some people overcomplicate it, but it's just really simple. Just simply, like, communicate and make sure you're on the same page. And if something's not working, then try to find a middle ground. And sometimes it's not gonna work, and that's okay either.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I think there's a lot of needing to face untrue or outdated paradigms, such as as those things we learned from our parents, where maybe they weren't talking in the most open and honest way about their relationship or their sexual needs, or whatever. If things weren't mirrored in our life, or maybe, I guess, for some, if you're lucky enough to maybe be mirrored in media in a healthy way, you're not gonna have the tools necessarily to know how to confront um, issues. You're just gonna try to be looking for the like, I go with movies for an example, because movies and media raised me. So when you do that, when you have that mentality, you're like, oh well, my dad never played catch with me. What does that mean? My this never happened in this way. So what does that mean about me? What value system do I gain from what I see and what I've been able to learn? And some of that's the point is, some of that's not true. Probably a lot of it, when we are young and don't know exactly what we should grab onto and what we should be tossing aside. It's kind of all, it seems like it's all important. So we're just going to absorb all of it. And obviously all of it can't stick. So you just maybe pick some of the pieces that seem to make sense at the time.
Mhm. And yeah, like I said, like, sexual freedom and, like, sexuality in general, what you want is all very nuanced and it's very gray. Um, and that's the problem. When you try to put, like, an objective truth in a very nuanced conversation, that's never gonna work. It's just not, because it's not the answer. So realizing that's gonna help a lot too. You know what I mean? Because, we try to look for easy, quick answers for hard solutions, and it just doesn't work. So once you just realize that it's quite literally your own journey with you and your other partner, and most just mainly yourself, then you'll feel a lot better about that, and it'll lift a lot of more weight off your shoulders. Hopefully, it will.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That makes sense. That makes sense. You'd also mentioned male sexuality and the importance of like self-expression and communication. What more or what else can you expand on that?
Right. So, as you know, as you probably heard, we are seeing a rise of conservatism in the United States, and that includes social conservatism. So, things like sexuality, healthy masculinity, sexual norms and kinks, and all things around that nature um, are now being seen as taboo again. So, when things like healthy masculinity, sexuality, gay marriage, and stuff like that is now becoming taboo again, you can imagine how taboo it's going to be for men who are exploring sexual desires and need to talk about this stuff is going to be. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up myself um, is because and the reason why I think like sexual exploration is so important is because men are living in a mental health crisis. And I'm not saying sexuality is the cause of this, but it's a symptom of a much broader issue, which honestly deserves its own episode on this podcast or somewhere on someone's podcast. Um, I'm going to try to unpack this in a way that's easy to understand and that's very organized. So there's a lot we can get into with this question. Um, so the male suicide rate has been much higher than it has been in the past. In a new study by the Mental Health Association website, I'm pretty sure the latest statistic was like 1 out of 3 men last year in 2024 seriously considered taking their own life, versus just 10 years ago where it was 1 out of 6 men. And body dysmorphia disorder affects around 1.7% to 2.9% of people. Um, and nearly half of that percentage is men from the ages of 13 all the way down to 15. So men are not doing very well statistically speaking on the mental health scale. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because we are living in a time where men are the most lonely that have probably been the most lonely in society. And also, if this point is more of a proven that more studies have come out, I think like the Pew Research Center, but also like I think Harvard did a study on this as well, is where I saw it last, is men are now opting out of higher education. They're far less likely to go to college. They earn fewer honors. And for the first time in American history, they're not performing as well as the younger generation before us, like millennials were. Um, and women are outperforming men in the statistic as well. Now, women's mental health is also at an all-time low as well. So I guess it's more of a societal issue. But what's drastically different is what we're dealing with right now. Like I said, there's a rise of social conservatism in this country, all around conservatism, but social conservatism. So things like sexuality, mental health, and gender norms are taboo topics again. Now, as well as I know, sexuality and things like kink can't really be taught. It's something that develops within us over time, and it's a part of you. You can't, get you can't get rid of it, contrary to what many people believe. So, with that being said, men are looking towards solutions to suppress things about themselves that they simply can't get rid of. And, I'm not really going to get too deeply into politics here. And I'm not saying you can't be, a conservative or have more conservative values if you are gay. But at the Republican National Convention, Grindr literally crashed because there were so many people using that gay dating site. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I find it funny that a lot of these men that are not only trying to suppress themselves into a certain truth that they don't want to see, but they're also preaching a worldview that says it's not only okay to talk about things like this, or that you can't teach sexuality or that it's not okay to be LGBT or whatever, but they themselves are not only practice what they're preaching. Now, the reason why of importance of male self-exploration and communication is important is because, like I said before, you can't get rid of something that's so core to your sexuality about yourself. I don't care how hard you try to oppress it; it's not going to work. Um, and if you're gonna press it down so far that it's gonna have to come out eventually. You know what I mean? It's gonna come out eventually, and it's gonna come out probably in an unhealthy way. And it's just not healthy. Like we talked about, before, sexuality is a spectrum, and I believe it's a spectrum. And you know, you can like certain things and be into certain things, and that's the kind of the way it is. and how it's always kind of been. But a lot of people in society says, "Oh, you can't be this if you're into that," or if you're fully straight, you can't like guys farting. You know what I mean? There's so many labels, and we put each other in boxes and stuff like that. And especially in the LGBT community, we put each other in boxes all the time, and we have all these labels and stuff. And I'm not saying that like, oh, there's so many genders. I don't have anything against that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking like people have this really strict expectation on your sexuality that you can only like things if you're this, if you're that, and we just put each other in the boxes. You know what I mean? And it's not really healthy. And in one of your really early episodes, I think it was one of Fartbro in it, if I'm not mistaken. He talked about a poll that said, I forget what side it was on that he talked about it was on, but it was a very high percentage of straight men were into seeing gay men farting. So that also proves my point right there that sexuality is expect as a spectrum, and you can like certain things without fully being considered gay or straight. And it's the same reason some people in my life, or I've seen before that might like boys, that are more feminine presenting, that are straight, that gay men might like some lesbians type thing. You know what I mean? It's all about sexuality as a spectrum. And I know the queer community has tried to, make some boxes to make it more easier to find out what we are. But in a way, it's been kind of toxic and all that stuff. And I feel like we could just like, get rid of that and just say, this is who I am and this is what I like. It doesn't mean I'm this, it doesn't mean I'm that. I like this, I like this. And it's okay to know what you like without saying what you are. So, in terms of finding out what you are, communication is really important. Now, when it comes to communication, um, the importance of communication, not just acceptance, it needs to be looked at again because, like I said, when it comes to communication, men need to let go of the talking about sexuality is considered gay. Like I said, the rise of conservatism is reinforcing the fact that men can't be weak, they can't be vulnerable, they can't talk about sexuality. And just a second ago, I was talking about how having an intimate, healthy relationship is healthy and how it's gonna help make you grow in that relationship, but also you as a person. It's gonna help you grow. How on earth are we supposed to have healthy, intimate relationships with men when they can't even open up to communicate what they like in a sexual setting, but also how they feel? What we're going to end up is having the bad result if we don't. We're going to end up having a bunch of men who don't know how to communicate that will suppress their sexuality. But like I said, because they can't get rid of that sexual desire in themselves, they will go find it in other aspects of their life that aren't healthy, such as cheating, such as having affairs, such as having excessive pornographic usage that goes above human connection. So there's no getting rid of men's desires of kinks or their sexual needs or to explore that. It's just a matter of if I communicate, can I actually advocate for a healthy, intimate relationship that doesn't cross boundaries and that works? Or I could go and keep saying that men can't be weak, they can't talk about sexuality. So then they go satisfy themselves with very unhealthy ways. And that's why it's very important to sexual communication is very important. And I think it's one easy solution, but it's very hard to do, if that makes any sense. We just simply have to get rid of the norm that men can't talk about these things because if we continue with that norm, then things are going to get very ugly. And we don't want that to happen. We don't.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying, and for me, the key question, and it's not necessarily one that you can answer or I can answer, or maybe anyone can answer for certain, but is it almost seems like the problems of communication in our society, in our culture, are unfortunately like cultural. They seem to be um, heavily ingrained in our um, psyche. And I don't mean like my first thought would be like, oh, we need a Mr. Beast or similarly widely Taylor Swift of someone to embrace this kind of openness of communication. And I'm sure Taylor Swift and whoever the first one I said, Mr. Beast, are, well, maybe not Mr. Beast, but let's say Taylor Swift, is very open to this. Probably people communicating and being open with each other. I'm sure maybe her songs are about that or what have you. But I don't think it is one figure. It's like how do we in my mind, and this is the way I think of it, maybe there's another way it comes to your mind, but like how do we convince all the other podcasts, all the other show hosts, all the other YouTubers, all the other people, not everyone, because some of them are going to be on the conservative side and against us, but the point is, how do we get enough people to be like discussing this and like as to go more broadly, sway the culture towards the recognition that communication is the key and communication is the kind of missing link in some of the very key problems that people discuss in their life and maybe even talk to their therapist about, and they just don't make the connection. So what do you think that is? How do we, or how is there any way we can do anything about that? I don't even know if just us as you and me, but like we as a, I guess, collection of people in general.
Yeah, so you did make a good point that I think society, especially in American society, has very much like been all about like don't feel, don't do this, like you know what I mean? Americans around the world are kind of known for being kind of a little bit cold, versus other parts of the world where maybe some things like in Germany, they do some things that might be considered gay over here, and they're not any less, you know, men are not any less masculine over there than they would be here. It's just socially different. Um, and when it comes to communication and getting other institutions like podcasts to talk about this thing, I think we have to realize that everything is nuanced, but at the same time, everything is linked together. So, when I started talking about why male communication and intimacy is important, I brought up mental health statistics very quickly. And the reason why I brought that up very quickly is because I feel like there is a link with the male epidemic, men finding out who they are. And there is a very huge link to male intimacy. You know what I mean? A lot of men are having sex now at lower rates than ever before. A lot of women nowadays, and even other gay men, are very unhappy with the dating scene that is out there. It's a very large pool of broken men that don't know who they are. So I think if we bring in some of these bigger issues and trickle our way down to smaller issues like kink and sexual intimacy, then we can start getting to the discussion that we need to get to. Um, and also, people have to stop declaring everybody their enemy. They think that, oh, just because you are a more conservative person, that you're my enemy, that we're going to disagree on everything and you can't talk about it. No, that's not the case. If anything, you just gotta like realize that everything else is nuanced. Talk to someone that has an open mind and everything, and someone else that has an open mind and also understands that everything else is nuanced, and then we can find that clear ground. But if you're gonna come off already with the attitude that you're my enemy because we think differently, then we're never gonna get anything done. And I don't think we are as nearly divided as we are in terms of social politics, economic policy, politics. It's just a matter of like we need to be able to just have these conversations because some people are scared. They're just scared to do it. They don't know where to start. So once we start with that, like bigger issues to get people talking, and then trickle our way down to smaller issues like that, then I think it'll be easier to talk about.
Hmm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I definitely agree that certainly the individual person, or what have you, conservative or liberal, whatever side you're on, they're not, they wouldn't be your enemy. I would more talk toward like, I wouldn't go expecting like Andrew Tate or some people who have been kind of absorbing, whether they do it for um purely populist reasons to keep the audience like, oh, this is what gets me an audience really easily or quickly, so I'm going to gravitate in that direction. I think just in terms of those are not going to be the people that are necessarily swayable, but yes, in the individual person, the viewers of these people, certainly I think are very much worth having discussions with, because I think those are the people we will have much more us in a general sense have much more in common with than these media figures would like us to believe.
Right, and yeah, we're never gonna change the mind of an Andrew Tate or a Ben Shapiro or someone else like that, you know what I mean? We're never gonna change their end goal or agenda because honestly, their goal and end agenda is to prey on younger men's insecurities. Before someone comes to them and says, "Hey, you don't have to do this or you don't have to be this way," they get to them first and they say that, "You need to be like this." So we're never gonna change your agenda, but hopefully we can reach the audience of people that doesn't know why is this so confused and lost and maybe give them some sense of direction. Um, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, if people like us don't, then the toxic ones like Andrew Tate and people that are not good people at all are gonna end up falling down that rabbit hole. Because I was one of them. I wasn't one that used to follow Andrew Tate. That was before my time. But when I was young, I used to watch like those, how to sit like a man. Like it was very stupid videos that were very like, oh, this is how you be a man. Okay, just by sitting. Like it was very stupid things. And like, a lot of boys are into that now, younger than ever. I was like 14, 13 when I did that, when I was like watching those videos, but now they're like 8, 7 years old. So it's like scary. But it's also like now it's like they're not even just saying, oh, the way you like believe or the way you operate in a relationship now can be considered weak. So we just need to get rid of all that now.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes, and I think there's a lot of it's probably even worse now. Like I remember, you watch Nickelodeon or whatever, and success was always like, even for like a teen or whatever, they had the cell phone and the girls were on the shoulder. It's like you get this feeling of being inadequate, even in watching shows that are meant for your age group, because you're feeling like, oh, my life's not like that. My life isn't looking like that. So I definitely too understand why people gravitate in the direction of people like, oh, this guy has an answer. I need to, whether you like you said, oh, I need to sit this way and then I'll be a man, or whatever the case may be. They prey on that. They make their money off that. And the unfortunate reality is it does real damage to people that hopefully caught early enough can be reversed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, the older people get, people are finally catching on that people like Andrew Tate are not good people to follow. Like even a lot of people that agree with him on a lot of societal issues agree like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be listening to some guy that's shirtless and smokes cigars and says that if you're not breathing right, you should not go to hospital. You know what I mean? Like maybe we shouldn't listen to people like that. So I feel like some people are waking up to that. But a lot of people still agree with his major ideologies. So that's just where you gotta like come about that. You know what I mean? But especially kids, like your frontal lobe is not developed. When they're consuming all that information, that's what they're going to be exposed to. And then from there, you're going to have to like, I don't want to say deprogram them because it sounds like, you know what I mean? But it's almost like not only a brainwashing of what some of these young boys are going through, but it's almost of like, in a way it is. Even I could even go further and say it's almost like a lobotomization, because it's like they're consuming all this content so quickly and so much that it's like, how do you even like go, what do you do after that? You know what I mean? Like they won't want to listen to anything you say. They're not going to listen to anything you and I are going to say. So that's like, that's mainly what this is about. When they're ready to talk about it, it's there. It's there. And they have real viable answers that are healthy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Maybe a topic that's a little bit more on the slightly more positive side. Another topic you mentioned to me was the idea that porn, maybe the porn space, has given queer men, especially fart fetishes, clarity when it comes to spaces where they're not welcome within. Can you talk more about what you mean by that specifically, and talk more generally about um, these spaces so I can get an idea of what you mean?
Yeah, certainly. It's something I was talking to my friend about the other day. Since the beginning of time, I think it's no secret that gay men have been ostracized from primarily straight male spaces like gym culture, sports, some video game culture, subcultures, the military, even for the longest time, even politics. Like now in 2025, that's kind of shifted, and obviously these institutions have become more accepting. But since the beginning of time, men used porn as kind of an outlet to reclaim these spaces that they were not allowed to be in. And women did this too throughout the 80s, and I'll get into that later as well. But men have used porn in a way to reclaim themselves as spaces that were predominantly taken over by straight men and that they were not allowed to be in or were ostracized from. That's why oftentimes in gay porn, the majority of storylines are like in a locker room with a bunch of sweaty guys. And then, I don't know, they stick a sock in your mouth and then they start fucking you, right? Or like it's the quarterback and then he is having his way with the little femboy cheerleader twink. Or they're at an all boys sleepover and then they get freaky. So men have kind of always, gay men have always kind of done this to reclaim, where they've always been ostracized. Um, and a lot of studies have been done too, about that sometimes your kinks or sexual fetishes can come from trauma. And a lot of gay men have experienced bullying as well as with oppression. And sometimes the brain can actually interpret trauma as a kink and make it kind of like sexy and erotic and stuff like that. So I think that's part of it, as well as a lot of men like to sexualize certain aspects and scenarios and make it kinky and fun so that it's healthy. And then they can actually work on accepting some things about themselves. Um, but also, like I said, um, they reclaim parts about their life that they were never able to reach. So I think, it's good. And that's why a lot of gay men did that. Now, for women, it's very similar, but instead of reclaiming something that they want to be a part of, women are kind of reclaiming the power dynamic that they were never able to have. Like such in the 1980s, the rise of like being a dominatrix and stuff like that. Or like, being more sexually like liberating in music in the 80s. That was new for 80s pop girlies. Obviously it was, men that wanted to be kinky and express themselves as well, which we just talked about. But a lot of women said it felt good to be able to call the shots and be able to feel powerful and not have men tell them like they can't do something, that they're, you're perceived in a different way, that you're being too provocative. um, and around that time, and even still today, women are looked as being like completely submissive sex objects, by certain men. Um, so to have that outlet, that one of the outlets that women were able to have and feel powerful about themselves and be seen through music, through sexual liberation, a lot of gay men followed those footsteps and kind of did that for themselves. Now going back to gay men, there's a lot studies that have been done that says, like I said, trauma in certain experiences of your life as a kid can become a kink and can be interpreted as something sexual. So there's a lot of people in this kind of way, in the fart community, that have kind of did the same. You know what I mean? Like they either been farted on as a kid, or they've kind of had a childhood that involved a lot of like maybe like fart humor, just farting all around. Maybe they're bullied by someone, like maybe they found the idea of like bullies that did gross things to them, like fart burp on them were hot, and then they ended up liking it down the line. But like I said, gay men had to reclaim those spaces, and they did that in that sense as well. Because I guess you could say farting, just like how I mentioned, like other aspects of masculinity, was all linked together. Um, so they started to reclaim those spaces in the far community. I notice that a lot too. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the settings will still be like, oh, the locker room, the gym bro, maybe in the military, like maybe even like the gassy gamer boy, older brother type aesthetic, or whatever. And by doing that, we were able to reclaim parts of our life that many of us felt like we missed out on. And I know Fart Bro in his episode, going back to him because I related to his episode a lot. um, he said that was the same for him, and I talked to a lot of people in the community, and that was the same for them. And I know he touched on this subject a little bit too. And it's a way for us to express something about ourselves that couldn't be expressed so easily, but in a more healthy way. Now, when the brain interprets trauma in a sexual way, it can be used as unhealthy ways as well. Like some guys are attracted to being beat up, race play. They might be attracted to actually being fully physically harmed. Um, when in a case like that, going back to what we said about what's healthy sexually, I think it's important to assess and decide what's dangerous and what's not healthy for your sexuality. But no, when it comes to farting, it's more of like, if anything, like an innocent masculine boy thing that, people can get off to. And then, it doesn't have to be creepy or dodgy. I think, you know, in this community, that what separates us is we're not built on a super erotic thing. It's kind of like an innocent thing that becomes erotic, you know what I mean? Versus the other way around. It's simultaneously innocent and fun, and a lot of people find it hot, so that's what's good. Um, And, I think that's good that men are able to claim those spaces back, and that's why.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I was going to ask you about the taking back power aspect, but you gave me a much more rich answer than I could have expected. I was just thinking more on a surface level of the recognition of being in a place where you belong, and having the strength of that. But no, that makes a lot more sense in terms of like um the word, I guess the word that's coming to mind for me is exercising trauma, or like working through, processing through aspects of trauma. Or another way to put that, or maybe not even necessarily to rephrase trauma, but like to rekindle something, or try to capture something that wasn't there in a more youthful time, but was desired just as equally as it is today. So that makes a lot of sense. That really gave me a really strong picture of what you mean by uh, it's such a simple idea of porn giving queer men and far fetishists the idea of where they belong and where they don't belong. But you gave much more than that to your answer. So I really appreciate that. You talked a little bit about this already, but perhaps you have more to discuss. Is that rise of conservatism in the U.S. and even elsewhere in the world? Um, it's pushing back a lot towards the legal validation, the acknowledgement, the rights of anyone basically outside of monogamous heterosexuality. Um, how have you seen this effect play out on male sexuality and expression?
Yeah, yeah, I fortunately have, and, I absolutely have, because like I said, for a while, we're talking about how men are worried about talking about sexuality because it makes them look gay, or they don't know how to navigate that, or they never, or they simply were never taught to, because we live in a world where that wasn't okay. Both the rise of conservatism, but also just like men just not knowing how to do that because they were never taught. Um, the ones that genuinely have a slight interest in exploring themselves, and want to learn more about their sexuality are now hesitant to do so because in the environment that they're now in, they don't feel like they're safe. So it's a big struggle. And like I said before, we need to stop this narrative so then it doesn't start making its way into politics. Because ultimately, what you're going to have is a bunch of old politicians that are insecure in themselves and ruin everyone else's lives because they're not happy with themselves. So if we flip the narrative now, then maybe we have a chance of stopping this. I feel that Gen Z is going to be the one to do that slightly. I would like to hope within recent studies, given that Gen Z has been the most conservative generation since World War II, that in fact we won't, fully be completely brain dead and we'll still be able to talk about sexuality and stuff like that. And you know what I mean? Because Gen Z was supposed to be the most politically active generation and everything like that. But even now, we're not going to protest anymore. We're not giving to certain organizations anymore. So I think the fetish of sexuality, but also the fetish is going to be interesting to say the least. Um, but like I said, it's just about getting rid of that narrative. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. If that damage just didn't take effect now, it's definitely going to start if we don't like stop it. So yeah, that's basically where that's at right now.
For sure, for sure. Well, I was gonna say maybe it's uh, I don't want to get conspiratorial, but maybe some of it is manufactured doomerism. But like, I think between the climate and the microplastics in the brains, and you know, I think people are kind of each generation has been equally like, hey, we're gonna do it, and been equally like, oh my god,
Yeah.
what can we even do in the face of all of this? Which is not, I mean, that's not to say the right answer is to give up, but it just seems like every generation comes up and then they're like,
Mhm.
they kind of lose the fire because they see the dragon that needs to be slayed is much larger than maybe it appeared their
Mhm.
youth or what have you. But I don't want to dwell on that too much. You also in speaking of pushbacks, you also talked about the pushback on different relationship styles and needs. That's a bit general. What exactly do you mean by that? And what's been the pushback, and who's it been from?
Kind of everyone. So, like I said, in the gay community, we kind of in the gay community, going back to what I said before about us creating our own space, gay men have always been more willing to, be more sexually open and explore different things because we've always kind of been non-traditional, right? Like if you were to marry a man, that's totally weird from the 80s or 90s perspective. 80, even maybe some individuals today, that's still considered like super weird. So we were always willing to navigate different stuff, and that includes different relationship dynamics. Um, there's always been a huge push on polyamory and monogamous relationships and what's ethical on that and what's not ethical. So with the rise of social conservatism in the country, but also within the gay community, um, and I'm not here to say if you, like I said, I don't want to make the idea that like if you're a gay person have a few more of a conservative ideologies that you're bad. That's not what I'm saying. If you're a free thinker, that's great. But the problem is if you think the government should get in someone's face and tell them what to do, or if you think society should get in their face and tell them what to do. And, going back to when I mentioned that sexuality is kind of a spectrum, that's all a gray area. For example, me and my boyfriend are in a monogamous relationship, but we still have fart meets with other people. We still watch videos. We still talk to other people in that sense. We still only have sex with each other. We are still the most intimate with each other. But going back to the label thing, people are like, "Oh, so are you monogamous or are you polyamory?" And it's like we're monogamous, but why can't we have our own boundaries in our own relationship and it just be our own relationship? Like, why do we need to have all this pushback from stuff and saying that, oh, you're not this if you're not that? You know what I mean? It doesn't happen often, but you do see that pushback, not from just me, but other people I've seen in the community or just out in general. So the pushback just needs to stop and do what you do to be happy. But since I brought up statistics before, I'll bring it up again. A few studies did find that polyamory and monogamy, even though it may not work for some people, and some people might find it weird not, the happiness and relationship satisfaction levels on which both parties practice are around the same. So that for I think that's I'm trying to find out which study this is actually from because I don't want to like spit shit. I don't know what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, like going back to that, like we can literally both be happy, and studies proven that it's possible to do so within different relationship styles. So yeah, that's kind of the pushback that I'm seeing, and that I think just needs to stop. You know what I mean? I think a lot of it's fear, because my mom always said like, "You fear what you don't understand." So if you just simply know more about something, you'll be like, "Oh, okay, I get it now." You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think there is a lot of maybe people questioning themselves and being like, well, this, I'm not happy in my relationship, but there's things I like, or I don't want to go so far as not happy, but like I'm not getting sexually fulfilled in this relationship, but I like all these other aspects. Maybe there's something I need to look at, or we need to discuss within the confines of our otherwise fine relationship. And I think that scares people, the because there's no, seemingly there are, if you look harder, but there's seemingly no pathways, no guideposts to how to do that. Now, like I say, if you look further, there are non-monogamy communities, and just like there's fetish communities and what have you. So there are people that can probably give you some of the way, some idea of what, how this looks like, or what this might work with. I mean, at the end of the day, it is, like you mentioned about your relationship, it's your relationship, so it may be customized. It's not like you can just slap on this label and that's your
Right.
relationship too. But I do think that, yeah, I agree with you, fear is a driving factor for people to not want to learn, and also attack other people. Like, no, that's wrong, you're doing it wrong because I'm having these thoughts in my mind that I'm not telling you about, but it's wrong because I say so, and everything I know and everything my life experience has told me it is wrong.
Yeah, and, like, people fear what they don't understand and what they don't see. You know what I mean? Like, if a rat was to, like, wear a bikini and run across the street, like, you'd be like, okay, what, well, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And obviously, that's not a realistic scenario that would happen. But it's like something you've never seen before or something you don't know about, you're gonna feel, weird towards it. And that's normal. Humans naturally have an instinct to fear things we don't understand because, in tribal days, we were very cautious of everything so we could survive. Every creature is like that. But, we we're able to create a higher conscience and understand things more. So we just need to get over that now. And what we'll talk about later on about education and anti-intellectualism. It just is all about education and telling people what certain things are all about. You know what I mean? Any misconceptions they have, just say like, "Oh yeah, no, that's not how we do it. This is just how this is." Or be open to questions too, because that's one thing I noticed too is like sometimes even on our the end of the LGBT community, um, sometimes people that have good intentions and want to learn more about us, there's some people within the LGBT community that get very defensive when certain questions are asked, and I don't think that should be the case. As long as someone's asking a sincere question, have at it. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're completely valid for not knowing, and you're also very valid for wanting to educate yourself. So here is the answer." Um, I feel like that has some stuff to do with it too. But yeah, that's all it is, just education.
I agree. I always enjoyed I don't know if it's only associated with school, but the thought of like no, there's no bad questions, and
Yeah.
that should be the case. I mean, as long as a person is earnest and sincere in their desires to learn, there are no bad questions, no dumb questions as well. And another thing, maybe a bit of an hors d'oeuvre to the intellectual conversation, is I
Mhm.
think people realizing that, especially Americans, but realizing that we're not the only way to do things. And I think of the most clear example is like nudity.
Yeah.
There's nudist communities here in America, and they get together and what have you. But for most people, they look at it with ire and strange, like side eye. Whereas there's like openly nude beaches in other countries around the world, and it's not even really given a second thought. And I think the whole point of mentioning any of that is whether it's nudity and all the way into how we practice our sexuality and organize our relationship, is the way you learned right here where you are physically, maybe different state to state even, but the point is like expand your mind to realize that there's not really a right.
Yeah.
There's certainly maybe some things that are right in terms of like morals or hurting people in that, but that's about it. Other than that, there's not really a right answer. So, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
people get caught up in looking for that. I'm probably guilty of it too, in terms of like, what's the right answer in terms of my career or whatever. And sometimes it's just got to play around and try things and figure it out. And I think that's just as true of relationships. Um, but that does go right into the more kind of big and far-reaching topic of that growing prominence of anti-intellectual thought, that is happening really around the world, but especially in the United States. Um, you know, this has a lot of implications for, um, I mean, many things. But what are your thoughts on how this anti-intellectualization will affect fetish and sexual education?
It'll have a big impact for sure. The big question, there's no doubtedly, no matter who you are, some sort of war on intellectualism and education. People don't want to learn, but not only do people not want to learn, they no longer want to trust institutions that have been giving us viable information for decades. And that's why suddenly we have, people coming out and saying that vaccines cause autism, that every transgender person and drag queen wants to come after your children, that raw milk is suddenly the most healthy thing in the world, even though there's bacteria in it. You know what I mean? So, and this can be very dangerous for many reasons. And not only do we not value education anymore, but we're starting to not also value things like college or even books, just books, things that everyone agreed at one point, like books are good to read. It's good to grow your mind on. Like, we're not even saying that that's good even more either. So that's bad if we're saying books are now bad. I'm not just saying books that people might like books are like, oh, all books are bad now. We're starting to not even trust informations that give us, written books, um, medicine, all this stuff. And when it comes to sexuality, um, and spaces like kink and all that, it's going to be really dangerous because a lot of people don't know about the LGBT community, but also alternate lifestyles in general. Um, you know what I mean? So and we already have a negative target on us, not only just the LGBT community, but people that are want to be more kink friendly, people that want to explore different paths, people that want to explore different things. We already have a target on our back already. Um, and a lot of people don't want to actually educate themselves. And like I said, there is a lot of nuance to everything. Um, so when people don't want to do that, they start looking for very simple answers to complex issues. And that's why you have people falling down the alt-right pipeline, people falling down weird conspiracy theory pipelines. That's why you have people looking for very simple answers to complex issue, you know. And I think part of it also could also be like the rise of like instant gratification, which is a whole nother conversation. But especially in the rise of education, I'm seeing nowadays, it's just insane. Like everyone is now anti-college all of a sudden. People saying college is a scam. And yeah, I don't think college is for everybody. I think if you're an entrepreneur or a blue collar worker, you're just as important to society and you can make just as much, but you know, if not more money. But to say that education in college is a scam and that it's not worth going to and that all public schools are indoctrinating your children, it's kind of getting scary. You know what I mean? It's kind of getting scary. And it's going to be very harder for us to educate people on sexuality and kinks and other things about our lives when people won't even sit down and listen because they believe that we're genuinely bad people that have an agenda. So the question becomes, how do we stop that? It's going to be a while, but yeah, like we got to get to a point where it's like, okay, we got to stop. You know what I mean? So that's why it's getting dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's even a That's even a harder one. Like I posed to you the question of how do we get people to encourage more open and honest communication in general, really. And this one's even, more difficult because this has been happening for a while. It's been a slow
Mhm.
progression, and the unfortunate thing about not reading books, and I'm not a prolific reader, but I've read enough and made enough connections, have some media literacy that I can understand and make the connection between what's happening now and the world of these books. Or, if we want to go more, I don't know if the word would be meta in this case, but like the making the connections toward, authoritarian actions that are happening today to what happened in World War II as they were ramping up for Hitler's Germany. Like there are connections that are definitely could be made, but there's a strong resistance, and some people deliberately doing so, but there's a strong resistance to make any connections to that or see anything as that bad. Nothing's that bad yet, so we don't have to concern ourselves um, with it. And yeah, I don't know how we turn that train around. I agree it's going to take a while, but I don't even know what will be the factor, the catalyst. How do you get people to come back to learning? Because admittedly, it's hard. Admittedly, learning is difficult. Um, it takes effort and it takes effort. Really, I don't have much else to say. It takes the willingness to want to open yourself up to it and absorb that information. So it makes sense why people default into, I'm gonna just go off what TikTok tells me, and that's the only research I really need. um but yeah, I don't know what the metaphorical bomb is that makes people um turn around. I don't think banning these things necessarily, TikTok is one I mentioned, but there's other factors, but I don't think banning them is the answer. But again, it goes back to how do we motivate people to eat healthy in this more non physiological sense, in this more mental sense.
Yeah. I think like every generation has its war, you know. And I think one of the wars that we face as well as many is the war on instant gratification and the internet. It can't be good. You know what I mean? Like scrolling, feeling a bunch of emotions at one time on our phone, you know what I mean? And being able to see all these information at once, it can't be good either. Because now you have AI videos that can now fully fake stuff. You have people like that are posting accounts on TikTok that are quite literally like making up random statistics and stuff and saying this and that and the third. AI has helped a little bit, but it's also made it worse. And what I mean by helps a little bit is AI has created tools that now weed out bad information that can search for good information. But even then, they can be like, "Oh, well, that's a big institution. They're not going to help." Um, so I think we're going to get to a point where it's going to get so bad, and I hope it doesn't get to this, but it's going to get so bad to the point where people are going to start being like, "Yeah, I was wrong about that. That was completely bull." You know what I mean? So I think the institution, this is a controversial one as well to talk about because a lot of people talk about, because like we said, we can't give simple answers to complex issues. A lot of people, especially now in politics, that become not even just more conservative, but maybe more like um they just don't want to associate with it anymore, is because they feel like they're being talked down to. They feel like they're being talking to like they're stupid, and they feel like they're being talking to as if they don't know anything, and that the people that are trying to speak to them are elitists essentially. And it's like, I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, if you ask us a question to a very complex issue, you're going to get a very complex answer, and it's probably going to sound a bit elitist. It might sound like I'm talking down to you, but I'm really not. Now, I think we should be trying to make complex answers as simple as possible for people to think that, but that's part of the reason why, is that not only do we have so much misinformation floating on the internet that people are easy to fall for these things, but also people don't want to listen to complex issues because they feel like it's elitist. They feel like it's not truthful. They feel like it's not narrow enough to understand. So I feel like once, these institutions, um, scientists, researchers, or even just politicians, especially politicians, realize that and are like, okay, how can we simplify our answers to very complex issues? Then they'll start to get some respect back and they'll at least feel more humane. You know what I mean? They'll feel more humane.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious too. Like I maybe watch too many like streamers or whatever, but um I think there is something to this this thought that a virtue signaling, obviously nobody, it's not a great thing to do, but there's almost a higher, there's the thought that authenticity is vice signaling, is like showing the negativity of like it's almost like, the things about you that are are negative, like you dehumanizing factors, the things where you don't see gay people as worthwhile, or immigrants or what have you. I think this ties into some people, and it's being celebrated as authentic. This is good. Like this is a person being I'm tying this back into what you're saying about elitist. It's almost like those people who talk about those things, that which like hit our like kind of gross human instincts, the thing that Ben Shapiro often will call as common sense,
Mhm.
these common sense aspects that aren't really so right, they're dehumanizing aspects, really. um that seems to be tied to this whole elitist idea. It's like the people who say they're trying to fight against people being dehumanizing to others are not being truthful, but those who let out their bile, essentially, those are the people talking truth. So I don't know if I have a fully coherent like thought that I've presented on that, but I do think it's part of this greater issue right now. It's this train in the wrong direction of
Oh yeah.
of uh
Mhm.
of society, just not really. Like I've always, I guess I consider it fortunate. Maybe it's not a well evolved trait for this time period. But like I've always like looked at the a human aspect of a person. Always tried to see even people I you know, don't like, people who have maybe screwed over my family or what have you, or at least, you know, from my perspective, screwed over my family. And I try to see, you know, the human side and even people like that on a personal level. So I'm I think there's a lot of that is missing. A lot of that is
Yeah.
like you talk about in terms of or talked about in this episode about seeing conservatives as not the enemy, which is entirely true. None of us, especially on this ground floor level of life, you know, where we're not politicians, we're not media figures, whether they be on the news or on YouTube, we're on the ground level with everyone else, and I think a lot of us would do better to see ourselves as one of these people, as one of the people that we are among, and kind of see the human in each of us instead of like kind of the I'm going to slap a label on you and move on with my life because you know, it's uncomfortable for me to confront the issues with someone who doesn't fully agree with me or agree with me in mostly principle. So yeah, I'm I want to use the word encouraged, but I guess I'm discouraged. But no, I guess I'm open to the idea that hopefully um this will come about. This, you know, the train, as mentioned a couple times now, is will will turn around and people will. It's hard to believe for me that people
Mhm.
don't look to don't see the human in each other, but I mean that is the reality, at least from the perspective I see, and I think the perspective we've been
Mhm.
discussing is
Yeah.
how do we get that back, or if it was never here, how do we get that? Um, how do we find that? How do we stop people from? I think there's a, you know, we've seen it, whether it was like the racism of years past is like, you know, the Irish before they were white and the Italians before they were white and all these groups.
Mhm.
It's like, what does that even mean? You know,
Yeah.
why do we do any of this? You know,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
to
And
whoever, yeah.
I noticed that too. Like throughout history, we always choose someone to hate. First is the blacks, and it's the Irish immigrants that work in the steel mills. Then it's the Italians. Then it's the women. Then it's the gay people. Now it's the transgenders. It's like, where does it stop? Like, who are we going to be hating next? You know what I mean? Like, it never stops. It doesn't. So I guess you're kind of right. We always choose to hate somebody. But the question is it worse now than it was before? Are we less tolerant now? Like, what's you know, like, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of it I think has come from exposure as well. I mean, we have 24/7 media, and not even media controlled by you know, the big 7 or what, 5 or what, I don't know how many channels there are not channels, but how many networks there are anymore. But the point is, like, you could go to some guy who's on the ground in the location the news is talking about and give you a completely different story, which may be closer to the truth, or maybe he has an agenda. Hard to know. We live in a time of so much information, which I don't think, again, is not like, we shouldn't say like ban that, no information, or limited information, a funnel of information, because I don't think that's the answer. But there is something to be said about, I don't know, curation, fact checking, whatever the word is that is, again. But then people will be like, oh, that's elitist. It's like, you can't win. It's like, I'd like to figure out what the answer is to you know, everything is like, you know, there's always a brick wall to everything that seems like, oh, that might be a solution. It's like, ah, fuck.
Mhm. I think maybe like you said, I don't think the train's gonna turn around. I think it's gonna keep going and reach its destination, but the people are gonna get off when it gets too much. And we're seeing that even now, like even with the current administration and the way politics are in the United States, um, people are choosing to get off the train already. You know what I mean? Whether it's the economic policies, which a lot of people are choosing to speak up on, whether it's the immigration that a lot of people are picking up on, whether it's the lack of the excitement that they thought they were going to get. people are already exiting the train now, so I don't think people are way too lost. And even if you ask people on a surface level, like if they agree on something, like if we ask the average person on the street, um, would you want your kid to act like Andrew Tate or Donald Trump? The majority of them are going to say no. If you ask the majority of people if they want everyone to live free and you to be left alone, everyone's going to say yeah. If we ask everyone, do you want to have free speech? Everyone's going to say yeah. It's just when you ask the question in a way that's like, "Oh, do you want drag queens to come into your children's school and teach you about sex?" They're gonna be like, "Hell no." Okay, but if you ask them, "Are you okay with a drag queen existing?" They're gonna be like, "Yeah, whatever." So it's the way they ask it, and the media does fuel fire on the flame that is already there, and that's why I say we're not as divided as we say we are, because depending on how you ask it and how people interpretize it, then they're gonna have their own hard opinion on it, which can make things worse. But in reality, we mostly just kind of want the same thing, and people are gonna have to do that awakening kind of themselves. You know what I mean? As I mentioned before.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Like I do think it is important on the as I mentioned near the top of this episode, that the podcasts or the news or whatever, the figures that people watch as broadly as possible do encourage the good things, the good qualities, whether communication, humanization of people, everyone. But yes, there is no substitute. There's no way to. It's like it's the old adage of you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And it's
Mhm.
just it really as simple as that. You can share this information. You can put it on every podcast and whatever. Everyone can be singing the same song, but if you're not joining along, if the person, the target, is not eating the information, then it doesn't do necessarily any good.
Yeah. And I think also a big thing is too is like I'm not saying everyone's voice doesn't matter because everyone's voice matters, but we shouldn't be valuing everyone's opinion or voice the same. And what I mean by that is they all matter. You all should say it, but we shouldn't be valuing Josh's opinion where he got a microphone off a TikTok shop asking people on the street. His We shouldn't be asking him his advice on the economic state of the world right now and on social issues because he probably doesn't have that much research data, and he probably doesn't have that much experience. Versus, I would much rather ask in economics. Now, I'm all for Josh having his opinion over here, whoever Josh may be. Let's say hypothetically, Josh is a white kid from the suburbs and he wants to start getting into political commentary. Great, I'm glad he is. We shouldn't value his opinion the same as someone that has years of experience in research. We just shouldn't. It's not anyone would say that. Um, but he should be allowed to say what he wants to say. He should be allowed to speak on those issues. It's just, you know, people have been looking to the wrong people for the right answer when they don't know themselves good to give a good answer on it. You know what I mean? If that's a lot of it too. Like with Trump's tariffs now, all of a sudden everyone wants to be in economics and say like, oh no, don't be scared, don't do this. You know what I mean? And it's just like, why am I trusting you about this? You know what I mean? Like, what do you know that I don't? Like, I don't claim to know everything, so why are you claiming to know everything? You know what I mean? So I think that's a bit of it too. Like going back to we need to be careful what we consume. Not everyone's opinion is going to be something that's going to be worth listening to in the context of I want to know what's really going on. You should leave that to the actual professionals. They're not always elitist. Sometimes they're just doing their job, and you are over there calling them satanic and evil. So,
I agree. I agree. And I don't necessarily think one thing that I think ties into that, and I don't think it's necessarily people's fault. They've been propagandized for a long time, but I think people don't necessarily want to learn. They want to hear from someone who uh, gives greater context or expands on the opinion they already have, and maybe makes fun of the other side for having the opposite opinion and poking holes in why the opposite's opinion is wrong, rather than someone who just is truly, like, whether they're as quote unquote unbiased as possible, like I'm whatever, however they don't have an opinion, but they're just sharing the facts. And that you can just kind of learn from the, like, history class or whatever. There's not necessarily an agenda in your everyday history class. But I think when in this world we have today, not everyone wants to have a genuine experience to learn about what's going on. They just want to listen to the opinion of the person they already know they agree with, to hear what their take is.
Mhm. And yeah, we see that a lot, and that's normal for people to wanna do. You know, if you're like if you're going back to whoever hypothetically Josh may be, if you're a random person, you work a random job, you might wanna value Josh's opinion more because you have more in common with him versus fucking Dr. George, who is a Harvard professor that's done research for millions of years, not millions, but many, many years, that is probably 7 years old. You're probably not going to have a lot in common with that dude. You know what I mean? So a lot of people want opinions from people that they feel more comfortable hearing them from as well, like you said, or that they feel like they have more common with. And a lot of times that's why a big reason why Trump won the election because he did a better job at nailing down the people and we're trying to get more demographics to be like, hey, I get it. You know what I mean? Even if it wasn't 100% authentic, he did a better job of that. You know what I mean? And is there going to be more people that are going to, I'm hoping that are going to do that more? Maybe. But that's really what it's about. We're at a point now where it's like, if you look trustworthy and you see more in agreement to me, then you know what I mean? Then it's gonna happen. You know what I mean? But also, like, the attitude in politics lately, it's kind of been branded as like, you know, especially conservatism has been branded as kind of the bad kids club. Like, oh, don't say that, they're all gonna flip out, like own the libs type of thing. So, and people feel cool when they're in that, they might feel cool when they're, you know, part of this club when they feel like they're hated. It's like a weird thing. Like they feel like they're the new punks now, essentially. That's what they feel like. And people that are definitely more progressive have a sense of that too, but in a way different way. You know what I mean? So it's very much like, we need to get over the hump and let people know, like, hey, you might trust this guy more, but just because you trust him more, or he might be more relatable, doesn't mean you should listen to him
I
on
agree.
this subject. Like
I
that's not something we need to do.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. I think it ties into like having critical thinking. Like in your smaller example, with this Josh character, I do think it's in a perfect world, it would be on Josh to recognize his own shortcomings, which we all have. This is not me hating on this Josh character, but like we all have a perspective, and a good media commentator, especially someone who's new into the space, should be able to say like, "Oh, this is what I think," but you know. This is not maybe right. Other people might have another opinion. Hey, let me talk to this, especially if I have the option to do so. Let me talk to this person genuinely who has an alternating opinion. I think that doesn't necessarily make the most popular content in this content world where it's kind of more about drama and fighting and having like a firm stance, because that's somehow more appealing to some. But no, I certainly more appreciate nuance, and I think to expand that to your more larger examples like Trump, it's just a larger example of the same. People who listen to Trump, and people who listen to Biden, whether they listen to both of those people exclusively, it's you're believing everything they say. But both of those people and all politicians are not giving you the whole truth. They're saying things. Trump is one of the most egregious examples, but Trump, like a Ben Shapiro, is just saying things that are just flat out not true, and just relying on people to not look into it, not think critically about it, not put the pieces together to see like, oh, how does that connect to this and that? It's just like Trump can just say like, I'm going to do this, it's going to bring jobs, and people are like, okay, we're all going to get our coal plant jobs back. It's like, but who needs, they're not mining coal anymore, and if they are, they're using
Yeah.
technology to
It's gonna
do
be
it.
automated.
Right.
Like
So
the steel
so
mills aren't coming back.
so Trump is saying something, and like I say, other politicians say things that maybe just don't even check out with the reality. So it doesn't matter what your favorite person is saying or what the person you trust is saying if they themselves aren't trustworthy and you're not thinking critically about what they are. Who is this person? Why are they saying this? Do they have an agenda? Are they telling me that agenda? Does that make it more genuine if they are? All these factors, it ties all back to all of that words ties right back to, the importance of critical thinking and thinking beyond just the open words. I think another way people have always said is reading between the lines. What is really being said here, and going after it and figuring out, like, what does this mean? Because I think that's a big reason why this train is headed in one direction. And I'm glad. I do agree that people are slowly jumping off. I'm hoping they start jumping off quicker, because I don't talk about the train like it's voting for Republicans or voting for Democrats or whatever. It's literally more of a humanistic train of, like, going away from, the train is barreling away from a humanism, or like seeing everyone as human and valid, and their experience as something to listen to, not necessarily trust, but something to at least listen to, and hopefully think critically about. And I hope people do kind of embrace that more, and like I say, jump off that train. So hopefully, I really, Jayden, I really appreciate you coming on again, and wanting to have this conversation, because it is such a um, deep and thoughtful uh, aspect. It's not something that people like to, or have everyday conversations about. Hopefully they do more. I hope that, I think that
Yeah.
could definitely change things. But yeah, I always appreciate the time I get to have with great guests like yourself to explore these topics, and hopefully, for all our small piece of the world, it can make some change, or help enforce some truths, or whatever the case may be for people, to think critically about what we're saying too, but I think definitely go towards that humanist angle of seeing everyone as a valid, person, and their experience is valid, and taking the
Yeah.
time to absorb that. I wanted to ask you, finally, do you have any updated thoughts from your previous appearance on what you think about for the future of this fetish, whether it's just for you or the fetish at large?
For me, well, like I said, I'm watching a podcast pretty soon, and it's gonna be about male sexuality as well as that. I'm gonna have many guests on. I would love to have you on at some point, honestly, because you've done so much for the community, for the straight side and the gay side. You're literally like you're the whole reason why we're able to have this conversation. And I don't think you realize the gravity of what you're doing. It's so important, and I love you for that. And I really admire that. So that's part of the reason why I'm now inspired to start a podcast with a few of my good friends. So thank you. Um,
No,
Second of all,
yeah, that's my pleasure. No worries.
um,
Thank you.
yeah. Second of all, obviously I'll make more content. That's more better production. But besides all that, in terms of the community, I know in Dills and Jules episode they basically talked about um frequently as well. They mentioned how Gen Z is going to be like the one to really do everything and how they're going to be the most accepting. Um, the fetish is on a long road to be acceptance. Now I think the um the fetish is on a very short road to notoriety, but notoriety and being noticed is way different than being accepted. You know what I mean? Because we're definitely on the road to being noticed. I saw a tweet from a very large creator that has half a million followers. I forget his name. I want to say it. I know someone's going to remember it and they might know what I'm talking about. But he's a very big creator. He does vanilla content. And I think he did like one or two fart videos and he did a tweet this morning. And he basically said, "So you guys like fart content, huh?" With a question mark. And it has like so many comments. Oh, it's by Internet Bay. Internet TX Bay on Twitter. That's who he is.
Ah,
He he posted was like, "You guys like fart content, huh?" And yeah, everyone liked that tweet. It's got so many retweets. It's already got like 51K views on it. So we're definitely on a road to acceptance. On TikTok Live, there was this one dude that was like farting for like gifts, and he was getting quite a few gifts. There's a bunch of TikTok accounts that are just dedicated to dudes farting now, like not in a sexual way, but also kind of in a funny way. But maybe it's sexual, who knows? So yeah, that's what's going on. We're definitely on a road to notoriety, but when it comes to acceptance, again, with the way things are going right now, I feel like it's going to be a long road to accepted. But we're definitely getting out there. We're definitely getting to the point where foot fetish is like we're right behind foot fetish. We're right behind piss play now. We're very, very close to being like fully like noticed now. Especially on the gay side. We're very close to that. We're just acceptance is kind of a further way down the road.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I hadn't been exposed to that perspective, but that is amazing to hear. I'm glad to hear such a positive aura, I suppose, around the fetish and how it's been progressing. That's really great. That's really great to hear. I am overjoyed to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, sweet, Jayden. I once again, I do want to thank you once again for taking the time to come on, and I think we'll definitely have to have you come back and talk more about both these all these important topics. See if anything has changed in that time, and talk about yourself as well.
Yeah. That'd be great.
All right, sweet, Jayden. Have a rest of your day.
You too.